Welcome back, and a very sincere, heartfelt, and enthusiastic welcome to our next guest. His name is Congressman John Moolenaar. He represents the people of Michigan in the United States House. He has the distinction of being the chairman of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, for shorthand, and is doing an extraordinarily impressive job in both helping his colleagues and the American people understand the nature of the Chinese Communist Party, for one thing, and the threat that it represents to us, in particular, in the form of what the CCP calls its unrestricted warfare against the United States. The committee's work is all available on their very, very informative website. But one thing that has really caught our attention is the work that the chairman and I think in a great many cases on a bipartisan basis, his committee have done in challenging what I consider to be the single most serious aspect of this unrestricted warfare, and that is getting, with the help of Wall Street, our money to underwrite it. And the chairman has been engaged in some very important conversations with people on Wall Street, in some cases in written form. And we wanted to catch you up on what he's been doing, and it's really momentous significance. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming back to Securing America. It's great to have you with us. We're going to use this video for the, I think, very timely conversation we will be having as our Committee on the Present Danger China convenes one of its webinars on this issue of, well, the guys on Wall Street who are wanted for underwriting the enemy. You're great to spend some time with us. Thank you, sir. Back.
Well, thank you for having me, Frank. It's good to be with you once again.
Wonderful. Well, let me start by just setting the stage a little bit. You've been prominently featured on Maria Bartiromo's show, and I think a special that she did on this issue of underwriting the enemy with some of your colleagues on both sides of the aisle. You are certainly familiar with a very important national security presidential memorandum that President Trump issued back on February 21st, I believe, of 2025. He called it the America First Investment Policy. Would you talk about what's wrong with a China First investment policy, which seems to be what guys on Wall Street have been pursuing for some time now?
Well, I thank you, Frank, and I commend President Trump for his leadership putting out the America First Investment Policy Memorandum, and we're working hard to codify that in Congress because we want to make sure in the future that we, as administrations change, as policies change, if Congress puts it into law, that's something that will stay. And it's going to be very important that we codify that policy. A couple of bills have been introduced, one in the Senate, one in the House on that topic. But the bottom line is we should not be underwriting the military expansion of our foremost adversary, and American taxpayer dollars, American investor dollars should not be going to benefit companies that are affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party, and especially those who are affiliated with the People's Liberation Army. They are expanding their military efforts dramatically, and unfortunately, in many cases, American investor dollars are being used to finance that effort.
And, this is such an important point. Is it an exaggeration to say that we are making possible, or certainly greatly enabling, this, some have described it as the greatest peacetime military buildup in history?
I believe it is a unbelievable military buildup. It's that China is on a wartime footing. They have, Xi Jinping has told his military to be ready to take Taiwan by force if necessary as early as 2027. When you look at the dramatic capabilities and their expansion in shipbuilding and in drones and even space technology, They're trying to catch up in AI. They're investing heavily in hypersonic missiles. They're dominating the battery space right now. And so you can see they are very strategic in their efforts, and they will leverage things like critical minerals and other, important manufacturing inputs to slow us down or to leverage us in different ways.
You mentioned batteries, Mr. Chairman, and I'm so glad you did, because one of the things that has been a focus of your efforts of late has been trying to prevent two of the major companies on Wall Street, J.P. Morgan, headed up by Jamie Dimon, and Brian Moynihan's Bank of America, from helping to raise billions of dollars for one of those companies, actually identified as by the Pentagon as a Chinese military company operating in the United States. Cattle is its name, and it's the largest battery manufacturer in the world. You happen to know something about it by virtue of course, their efforts to do some manufacturing of those batteries in your native state of Michigan. Tell us about your concerns on the score of cattle, if you would, sir.
Well, we reached out to these two American companies, these banks that are funding the IPO of cattle in the Hong Kong market. And we reached out back in April, encouraged them not to do that, and presented evidence to them of cattle's ties to the Chinese military, even cattle's ties to slave labor in their supply.
Yes.
And, we requested information in writing. We reached out in good faith to inform them of these concerns. And unfortunately, they went ahead and continued this process. We've reached out again and requested information. And they basically, when Congress, reached out for accurate information to help us set policies, they sent us press clippings, basically public information that was available anywhere. And the bottom line is this: we need to know what kind of, they say they did due diligence on these investments. We need to know what that was based on. Was it based on assurances from the Chinese Communist Party that they're not affiliated with the military?
Yeah. Trust us. Mr. Chairman, I want you to drill down a little bit more on that on the other side of a short break. We'll be right back, folks. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Chairman John Moolenaar of Michigan is in the House virtually. I couldn't be more pleased to say. He is the distinguished leader of, I think, one of the most important committees in the United States House of Representatives at the moment. It is a select committee impaneled for the purpose of helping the rest of us understand and develop policy, if not actual legislation, hopefully both, on how do we contend with the threat we face from the Chinese Communist Party. And Mr. Chairman, I hated to interrupt you. You were on a roll. You were asking Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan and Brian Moynihan of Bank of America personally to answer an extremely well done, detailed letter. I think you had 20 or 21, something like that, questions that we really have a need to know the answers to, about specifically their involvement fundraising for a particularly dangerous Chinese company. I understand they're putting advanced batteries in submarines that may be used to destroy our Navy in the Pacific. Could you comment on that and how they've been responding to your request for information?
Well, the Pentagon has designated cattle as you pointed out, a Chinese military company. The Commerce Department recently came out and confirmed that as well, because of course cattle is suing in court trying to get that designated change.
Right.
And so it's important that we presented that information to J.P. Morgan Chase. We presented it to Bank of America, and we asked them the question: what is your due diligence? How do you know that your investors are not investing in an entity that's partnering with the People's Liberation Army? Mm-hmm. And they said, well, trust us. We've done our due diligence. And we said, that's not good enough. We need to know. And so I've subpoenaed them for information on their due diligence, because ultimately their shareholders, the general public, deserves transparency. We don't want our investor dollars going to fund the military of our chief adversary. And there are consequences when this happens. And so we're subpoenaed them. That happened just yesterday. And we expect answers. And we're going to continue to get the truth. And we are going to continue to build policies that prevent this in the future, because ultimately this IPO that's done through Hong Kong is the tip of the iceberg. And if we allow this to continue to go forward in this fashion, we're going to see more and more of this, and we're going to have people's pensions and their life savings and their investors' dollars going to fund entities that actually could use this and the best technologies against our men and women in the armed forces.
Amen. Well, again, your clarity on this, Congressman, is so appreciated. It's not been much in evidence, I'm sorry to say, from successive presidents, not just this one, but apart from this, sort of, presidential memorandum, they call it, the administration has seemingly been willing to sort of turn a blind eye to all of this. And I just wanted to draw you out on how consequential what JP Morgan and Bank of America have done in this case is, both with respect to enabling cattle to raise immense amounts of money, but also perhaps, as you've suggested just now, creating kind of I think it's been called a highway for lots of other companies, perhaps A shares that are also going to use this sort of end run on the American first investment policy through Hong Kong. Could you comment on the implications of this for the future?
Well, for sure. And I want to look at it from the standpoint of investors, because they are trusting these American leaders, these bankers, and they are at risk of their reputation. They are at risk of regulatory risk. They are at risk of these investments are opaque.
Yes.
So you have very little understanding of what's actually happening with these Chinese companies. And so they are putting...
I suspect most American investors have no idea they've got money in these companies.
I think you are exactly right. And I think it's important that we have transparency and disclosure requirements. And we highlight these situations where cattle is on a known list by the Department of Defense and the Commerce Department as a Chinese military company. And for the Bank of America, for JP Morgan Chase to simply ignore that, to me, is at risk for their entire shareholders and people who trust them to make their investments for their future.
Would you go so far as to say, sir, that especially if, God forbid, we get into a shooting war with the Chinese Communist Party, that those investors could lose everything they've got in China?
You know, we've seen how the CCP is willing to leverage anything. They will leverage, students in this country that are Chinese nationals because of their national security laws. They will threaten their families. For sure, they will use every bit of leverage they can to defeat our goals. And so I think, every investor ought to be asking the question, are my investment dollars going to fund Chinese companies that are in some way partnering with the CCP and the People's Liberation Army?
Yeah. And I so appreciate the nuance there. It's a civil military fusion policy of the Chinese Communist Party, as well as the direct support for these PLA companies, that is so concerning. Could I ask you one last question, sir? I know that in one of your other very important initiatives